Hello and welcome back. Now let us continue our discussion in the topic Australopithecus. In the last lecture, uh, we discussed about the discovery of Australopithecus. So now let us discuss about the general characteristics of Australopithecus along with its anatomical description. As I told you, Australopithecus lived somewhere between 4 to 2 million years ago. This is roughly. Okay. So there are two types of Australopithecus. One is gracile and the another one is robust. Gracile is a short and a slender form of Australopithecus. Short and slender, while robust is a gigantic form of Australopithecus. One is short and slender, and the another one is gigantic. These robust were strictly vegetarian. On the other hand, the gracile were omnivorous. Omnivorous means they eat both meat, fruits and nuts, tubers, they hunt animals, etc. So how do we know that the robust were strictly vegetarian and gracile were omnivorous? So by studying the molars, we get some idea about their food habit. Most of the vegetations like fruits, tubers contains silica. And silica is capable of creating large-scale attrition in the teeth. As a result, the molars of robust shows a greater wearing pattern. If you look at the molars of robustus, a greater wearing pattern, wearing down of teeth. On the other hand, this was not the case with the molars of the last three teeth, molars of gracile. In ecological sense, we can call robust as a specialist, and gracile as a generalist. Specialist means they have a very narrow range of food habits. They just eat only very few food items. By generalist, they have a wide range of food habits. If fruits are not available, they can rely on meat. If meat is not available, they can rely on tubers. But that is not the case with the specialist. So robust or specialist, they had a very, very narrow range of food habits. They were strictly vegetarian. On the other hand, the gracile were omnivorous. That's why we call them as generalists. They have a wide range of food habits. Along with that, robust were gigantic. They are large and massive when compared to gracile. Gracile is a short and slender form of Australopithecus. So I told you that the Australopithecus lived somewhere between 4 to 2 million years ago. Until 2 million years, there were no much issues for the Australopithecus. But towards the end of, or towards the beginning of this 2 million years ago, there was a change in climate. A very cold weather started gripping, a very cold climate started gripping the earth. That is the return of Ice Age. As a result, there was a change in ecosystem. There was a change in vegetation, and there was a gracile, right? They started facing food shortage. Sorry, it's robust. Robust were generalist, right? So robust started facing food shortage. There was some scarcity of resources for the robust to survive. On the other hand, gracile, as they were omnivorous, they were capable of surviving somehow by eating meat or hunting something. They can eat something and they can survive. At the same time, as a cold, very cold climate started gripping the earth, gracile, because it was short and slender, it managed to run very fast. It managed to hide itself in cracks and crevices to protect themselves against the very cold weather. But that was not possible for the robust. Hardly it could run fast, hardly it could climb a tree to collect fruits. And it made life very, very, very horrible for the robust. As a result, this robust form of Australopithecus started vanishing from the environment. And at some point of time, they became totally extinct. And it was this gracile form of Australopithecus which got further evolved into Homo habilis. This Homo habilis got evolved into Homo erectus. And it is from this Homo erectus, or it is the Homo erectus which got evolved into Homo sapiens. Into Homo sapiens. Okay, so as robust was specialist, it couldn't adapt to the changing climate and the changing environment. But on the other hand, gracile somehow managed to adapt to the new environment, adapt to the new climate, and it further got evolved to live under the extreme climatic conditions. So it is the gracile form of Australopithecus which got further evolved into Homo habilis. Okay, so as I told you, there are a number of important species in Australopithecus. We have Australopithecus ramidus, Australopithecus anamensis. Then we have Australopithecus afarensis. Then Australopithecus africanus. Somewhere by around 1992 to 94, these fossils of Australopithecus ramidus were discovered. And once when these fossils were discovered, it was named as Australopithecus ramidus. But later it was found that the collection of these fossils, right, belonging to this particular cultural phase or this particular evolutionary phase, they were a bit more primitive when compared to that of Australopithecus. Their cranial capacity was around 300 to 330 cubic centimeters. So later this Australopithecus ramidus was renamed as Eridipithecus. Eridipithecus ramidus. So these four are the very important gracile species of, or gracile type of Australopithecus. We also have Paranthropus. Paranthropus robustus, Paranthropus boise, and later, right, even this Paranthropus were renamed as Australopithecus. Even if they mention as Australopithecus robustus or Paranthropus robustus, both are synonyms only. Both refer to the same genus only. Okay, that means later even the Paranthropus genus was included in the Australopithecus genus itself. These two refer to the very important robust species, while these are the very important gracile form of Australopithecus. Gracile form of Australopithecus. Okay, fine. Now let us discuss the cephalic features of Australopithecus. Cephalic features of Australopithecus. Okay, cephalic, by cephalic we refer to the head region, head and skull. By cephalic we refer to the head region. Okay, so let us discuss few very important cephalic features of Australopithecus. The first important thing is the cranial capacity. Cranial capacity. The last lecture we have discussed what we mean by cranium. Cranium refers to the collection of bones which covers or which envelops the human brain. The human brain. So it is composed of number of bones, and I told you in the evolutionary perspective it is important or it is essential to know at least three important bones here. One is the frontal, the next is the parietal, and the third one occipital. Frontal region, parietal region, and the occipital region. We also have the temporal region. This is this one, right? This is temporal. And we also have this sphenoid bone and the ethmoid bone. There is no need to bother about those two things. If you are okay with frontal, parietal, and occipital, that is much more than sufficient. Frontal, parietal, and occipital. So cranium. So by cranial, this is what cranium is. And the other bones, right, these are facial bones. So this is a zygomatic bone, this is zygomatic arch, this is the lower jaw is technically called as a mandible. I'll come back to that after some time. The upper jaw is called as a maxilla. These are facial bones. Okay. So I hope you're comfortable with the frontal, parietal, and the occipital. So by cranial capacity, just by cranial capacity, we refer to the capacity of the cranium to hold a brain. Indirectly, this refers to the size of a human brain, a size of the brain. So the cranial capacity of Australopithecus ranges roughly between 400 to 530 cc, cubic centimeters. So this is just 1/3 the size of human brain. Our cranial capacity is roughly around 1500 cc. But see, it is just 1/3 the size of human brain. But when compared to the other Miocene apes, Miocene, this is the geological period in which the Australopithecus lived. Or when compared to the contemporary apes, this brain size shows a greater development. And the development is largely in the parietal region. This is parietal, right? Here in this parietal region. Here we have the cerebrum. Only the enlargement of brain here, these are the regions known for sound production. These regions of the brain is associated with sound production. And the development of brain in this particular region in Australopithecus suggests that Australopithecus might have had some sort of verbal communication. They might have shouted at least, or they might have used some sort of words to communicate. And there is also some enlargement of brain in the cerebellum. I hope you will be comfortable with the regions of brain like cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla oblongata. Even an 8th class kid will be comfortable with these terms, right? Okay. Cerebrum is the forebrain, cerebellum is the hindbrain, and medulla oblongata just below that. So the development of brain in the cerebellum allowed Australopithecus to make very fine body movement during locomotion. Even while running, they can take a stone and they can throw it on some other animal. They can just carry a sharpened wooden pole with them, and if they find any animals, even while running, they can throw it on them. This is evident from the development of brain in the cerebellum. So got it? So the development of brain, see, there is an enlargement of brain of Australopithecus, and this enlargement is largely found in the parietal region. So the parietal region where we have the cerebrum, right? These are the regions meant for sound production, are associated with sound production. So the development of Australopithecus brain in this region suggests that Australopithecus might have had some sort of verbal communication to speak and to communicate. And the development of brain in the cerebellum allowed Australopithecus to make fine body movements during locomotion. And one more thing I forgot to tell you, the development of brain in cerebellum also allowed Australopithecus to make fine manipulation using hand. They can use the fingers now to make tools, to make finer objects. Correct? Fine. Then. So the next is other cephalic features. Receding forehead and the presence of sagittal crust. See here, this is the skull of a human being. So here, look at the forehead here. See how the forehead is here. Forehead is the seat of intelligence. But for Australopithecus, the forehead used to be sloping like this. So it is during the course of evolution, the brain started developing and we got the straight forehead. So for Australopithecus, forehead is sloping. For most of the primitive apes, even for Homo erectus, even for Homo habilis, the forehead used to be sloping like this. Next is sagittal crust. Sagittal crust refers to a ridge-like bone on the top of the head. So this is the cranium, right? On the top of the cranium there will be one a ridge-like bone. I'll show you in another picture. So this one, this ridge-like bone on the top of the head, right? This is called as sagittal crust. So what is this sagittal crust? What is the purpose of this bone on the top of the head? Is this totally absent in human beings? No, this is not completely absent in human beings. So in the course of evolution, this bone became thinner and thinner. And it is almost completely absent for most of the human beings. But even now, the Alaskan Eskimos, they have some small rudimentary form of or minute form of this sagittal crust. This sagittal crust, right, it provided attachment area for few muscles. Attachment area. So on a bone, a muscle gets attached, we know that. But A muscle cannot attach to the bone in each and every place. So there are some specific regions in the bone where the muscles gets very tightly attached. So in every bone we can see some rough patches. And these rough patches are meant for the muscles to get attached. Suppose if you are a non-vegetarian, and suppose if you eat a leg piece of a chicken, you can always see that towards the end of the one side of the bone, right here in these patches here, we can see we cannot pull that meat out very easily when you eat. And once the bone dries, sometimes if you see that bone, right, we can see some rough patches here, but this area will be very smooth. So these are the attachment areas in the bone. Similarly here, this sagittal crust, it provided attachment for few muscles called as masseter and the temporalis. So these are the two muscles, masseter and temporalis. So these are the muscles meant for the jaw movement, biting and chewing. We know that now most of the meat which we eat, right, it's almost like a piece of bread. But on the other hand, Australopithecus, they ate raw meat. They had no idea of making fire. Homo habilis were the first to make fire, and even Homo habilis had no control over fire. It was Homo erectus which first had some control over the fire. That means how we can make a fire and how they can restrict that fire within a particular place. So that's why it's Homo erectus started using fire to cook food, to roast the meat. But on the other hand, Australopithecus, they were forced to eat raw meat, hard nuts, and some fibers. So for that, they need to have a greater masticatory apparatus. That means they need to bite, and chew the meat to a greater extent. So for that, they were in need of extraordinary muscles. This masseter and temporalis, right? It was so huge, these two muscles were, and these muscles used to get pulled further up the top of the head. And these muscles used to get attached here in this sagittal crust. So sagittal crust provided attachment areas for the muscles. But in the course of evolution, when our ancestors started eating processed food, you can say from the period of Homo erectus, there was no need to have this extra or the large muscles, because there is no need to bite and chew the food to a greater extent. So the masseter and temporalis, these two muscles started becoming smaller and smaller. And with the passage of time, there was no need for, or the functions attached with the sagittal crust vanished. So there is no need to have that sagittal crust. And with the passage of time, it became smaller, smaller and smaller. And it is almost absent in the human beings, but still in a rudimentary form, at a microscopic level. This bone is found among the Alaskan Eskimos, the Eskimo who live in the cold Arctic region of Alaska. Got it? So are you comfortable with the term sagittal crust? So sagittal crust refers to the ridge-like bone on the top of the head of Australopithecus. Sagittal crust. So next is supraorbital ridges. Supraorbital ridges. Orbits. By orbit, we refer to this opening, which earlier held the eyes. These are orbits. By supraorbital ridge, we refer to the ridge-like bone which is found on the top of Australopithecus. This ridge-shaped bone found on the top of the armpits. We call this as the supraorbital ridge. So what purpose did this supraorbital ridge serve? See, just now I told you that Australopithecus need to bite and chew their food very hard. So this extraordinary biting and chewing by the lower jaw is technically called as mandible. It will leave a stress in this bone. This biting action, the biting action of the lower jaw will leave a stress in the forehead. And if these bones are weak, these bones may crumble because of the extraordinary biting and chewing process. So the supraorbital ridges developed as a reinforcement in this region. So this is found as a reinforcement in the forehead to protect the bones from crumbling because of extraordinary biting and chewing. And once again, with the passage of time, when the need for biting and chewing declined, and there is no need to have a very rod, like a very tough supraorbital ridge. So the supraorbital ridge started vanishing over time. So with the passage of time, the supraorbital ridge became thinner, and for us it is almost completely absent. And both the things, both sagittal crust and the supraorbital ridges were very prominent and very thick in robust. And it is slightly thin in the case of gracile. Comparatively, it is smaller and thinner in gracile. Are you comfortable with the term supraorbital ridge? Okay then. So supraorbital ridge is a reinforcement in the forehead region to prevent the bones from crumbling because of the extraordinary biting and the chewing activity. Okay. Next is prognathism. Prognathism means a protrusion of the oral cavity forward. You can see in this picture, right? We can feel as if this oral cavity is being projected forward. This is largely because of 2-3 reasons. The first and foremost being a large and massive mandible. Mandible refers to the lower jaw, and the upper jaw is called as maxilla. Also note down for Australopithecus, there will be no chin. Chin is completely absent. See here, for human beings, the bone will be like this. There is no curve here, there is no chin for Australopithecus. Even the chin later developed when the course of evolution, when the mandible became thinner and thinner. And even it should not become weak, right? So the curve developed largely as a reinforcement here to make the bone bit strong. So mandible is very large and massive for Australopithecus because it need to bite and chew raw meat, hard nuts. In the course of evolution, this mandible became smaller and smaller. So the very large mandible, along with that, the nasal bridge. This is the nasal bridge. For us, the nasal bridge is being projected forward. This particular bone here is the nasal bridge. Is being projected forward. But for this primitive apes, for Australopithecus and Homo erectus, this nasal bone is depressed like this. See, the nasal bones are depressed and the oral cavity is being projected forward. As a result, the face of Australopithecus looks concave. So prognathism is because of a large and massive lower jaw, that is mandible, and the flat and depressed nasal bridge. So because of excessive prognathism, the face looks concave for Australopithecus. Next is the foramen magnum. In anatomy, if you say foramen, this refers to a opening in the bone. So foramen magnum, there are a number of openings in our bone. In the skull, we have two very important openings. One is the foramen magnum. This is foramen magnum. You can see here, right? This one is the bottommost portion of the skull, in which the lower jaw has been detached. Lower jaw has been detached. Okay. So this is a foramen magnum. So foramen magnum is a opening through which you can see brain continues as a spinal cord through this opening. There are also other opening like jugular foramen. Jugular foramen is here. This is the jugular foramen. It is through this jugular foramen, right? The jugular vein which carries blood to the brain, it passes through that foramen. But come back to foramen magnum. See where the foramen magnum is placed. Foramen magnum is more posteriorly placed. Not posterior actually, more centrally placed in human beings. But in the case of the primitive apes like Ramapithecus, Dryopithecus, okay, this foramen magnum used to be placed more posterior. When the animals had a quadrupedal locomotion, quadrupedal, that means walking using all the four limbs. You can have a look at a dog if you have a pet in your home. So for them, for the face to get projected, the foramen magnum will be here. And the vertebral column will just have a single arched one. And in the course of evolution, when our human ancestors, when they descended from the trees and they were forced to walk on the earth, when they were forced to walk, even Australopithecus was the first human ancestor to have a terrestrial life, a terrestrial habitat. The foramen magnum slowly, gradually it declined, and it had reached this particular position. So the presence of a foramen magnum, or the more centrally placed foramen magnum, signifies an erect posture and a bipedal locomotion. So this is one very important evidence to show that Australopithecus were bipedal and they walked using two legs, and their forearms were free, which they used it for hunting or making tools, etc. So apart from this, right, we can also see other features like these are occipital condyles. So condyle is an attachment portion of a bone. This bone, right, gets attached to the backbone, the vertebral column. Okay, occipital condyles. So the more prominent occipital condyles again suggest that Australopithecus had an erect posture. Okay, so these are the very important cephalic characters of Australopithecus. Cranial capacity around 400 to 530 cc. Sloping forehead. Presence of sagittal crust. Then prognathism, concave face, and more centrally placed foramen magnum. and supraorbital ridges. Supraorbital ridges were very thick and prominent in Australopithecus. Got it? Fine.